Right, so moving on to network security. So got a number of different options or technologies within the Azure platform that you can use to secure your network. So the first one there is DDoS Protection. So this is enabled by default for free, and it's the same protection that Microsoft use across all of their cloud services. If you need more visibility into what's going on and more reporting functionality, and they'll actually give you an SLA on your applications as well, then you can upgrade that to DDoS Protection Standard, and that will give you increased functionality and reporting. Web Application Firewall. So if you're hosting web services within Azure, be that on virtual machines or something like App Service, then it's best practice to enable a Web Application Firewall in front of those, and that will prevent common website attacks like cross-site scripting or SQL injection. The Microsoft native technology that does this is on Application Gateway. So when you deploy an Application Gateway, you can deploy it with WAF functionality. Azure Firewall, fairly new to the Azure platform, last sort of 18 months or so. So this is essentially a PaaS service. So you deploy Azure Firewall as a resource into Azure. Fairly simple and quick to get up and running. Easy to define your rule sets. You can make use of Azure native things like service tags as part of your firewall rules. So quite nice and easy to get up and running. It is PaaS, so you don't have to manage virtual machines or anything, and it will auto scale with the amount of throughput going through the firewall. Doesn't have to be, but typically you would deploy that in what's called a hub and spoke topology. So you'd have a central hub network with the firewall in and any shared services, and then have multiple or one or more spokes peered off that hub, and then you'd force any traffic going in and out of Azure through that firewall. Network security groups you're probably familiar with already. So these can be applied at subnet or virtual machine NIC level. And they're just a fairly basic set of level 4 kind of firewall rules, which can be used, quite often used in conjunction with something like Azure Firewall. So you might use network security groups on subnets within a spoke, but then route traffic in and out of Azure or between spokes via the firewall. So they can be used in conjunction. Service endpoints and also private link. So this is really a way of securing PaaS resources. So if you're using things like storage accounts or Azure SQL, Azure Container Registry, Cosmos DB, all of these PaaS services, they basically reside on a public IP address on the Azure backbone network. Now there's various options to secure them, but two of the options there, service endpoints, the first one, and that enables you to, in effect, tie those type of resources to a specific subnet or network. So you're basically routing traffic from, for example, a virtual machine straight across the Azure backbone network to Azure SQL database. To take that a step further, the slightly sort of newer iteration of that is called private link. And what that does is enable you to actually assign a private IP address to individual PaaS resources. So in that way, you could have, for example, an Azure SQL database, and you enable a private link endpoint for that database. And that will give it a private IP address that you could then use to connect from, say, a virtual machine in a VNet or a web app that's been VNet integrated straight across to a SQL database on a private IP. The other thing that private link enables is that you can access those resources on a private IP from on-premise as well, so over VPN or Express route. So it's really good sort of progress in securing those PaaS resources. It's available for a number of items already. There's a couple more in preview, web apps being one of them. So definitely encourage you to take a look at that, because it really makes the whole PaaS servicing a lot more secure. And then lastly on the list, we got security appliances. So these are things available in the marketplace from the sort of top security vendors. So it'll be people like Checkpoint or Barracuda, Cisco, have firewalls, things like Web Application Firewall, appliances that you can deploy from the marketplace. The advantage of that is if you're using these on premise already, and you've already got skills within those technologies, then you can deploy in essence the same product into Azure, and you can manage those all from your single pane of glass management tool. They're fully featured, much the same functionality as you would have on prem. The only consideration is they're more complex to set up. As they run on virtual machines, you need to take into account the high availability considerations. So typically you deploy them in pairs behind load balancers. They're generally quite well documented, but they do give you that full functionality of what you'd be used to using on premise.